It was an ending and a beginning. The end of a whole Jewish civilization wiped out in Europe. The year was 1951. Young Jewish veterans who discovered California in their service days returned with their wives. They all asked the same question: where is the Jewish neighborhood? The answer, that there isn't one, doesn't stop them from settling down in Contra Costa County. While the men work, the women organize. They establish the League of Jewish Women and make plans for a Contra Costa Jewish Community Center to be a focal point for Jewish activities, education, and religious observance. They begin by securing Lafayette Town Hall for Sunday school. At the same time, in a gesture of great faith and optimism, a minion of 10 men personally guarantee a loan of $40,000 toward the purchase of a South Seas restaurant called Planter's Dock. Once the 20-foot-tall tiki is removed, the ground is dedicated and the League raises the money to remodel the building, turning the dining room into a chapel, the coat check into an office, and the lanai into classrooms. They do all of the work on their own, and in fact, it will be 3 years before the center even has its own rabbi. For the next 3 decades, the congregants worked tirelessly on planning, building, and growing, all in the interest of creating the Temple Isaiah we know today.
In 2012, Temple Isaiah will celebrate 60 years. 60 years. How do we thoughtfully approach such an amazing milestone? Obviously by looking toward the future, but what about the past? We Jews have always paid attention to our history, learning wise lessons from our ancestors and following the commandment, Zachor, remember. Temple Isaiah began as a community of about 50 families and has grown to 900. The success and vitality of this congregation are apparent not only to its members, but to the wider community. So how was our congregation created and why? What were the values and motivations of our founders and early members, those congregants who have been members for over 25 years? Several months ago, we initiated a plan of discovery. We wanted to do this not with a survey or a Q&A, but by listening to stories. Because we know that stories reveal so much, not only about the tellers, but about the time and place in which their stories are grounded. We are so grateful to a handful of members who opened up their homes to host community conversations, small group discussions led by Temple's Kesher Isaiah team. All those folks who've been members for 25 or more years were invited, and 120 participated. The experience was at once humbling, inspiring, and immensely useful. We want to share with you what we learned.
While each story we heard was unique in its perspective and details, we were amazed by how much they fundamentally held in common. And they revealed so much about the early culture of Temple Isaiah, about the power of connections and the importance of looking to and planning for the future. We learned that for so many of our congregants, Temple Isaiah was a place where they not only prayed and learned, but where they lived, worked, raised children, and built a community. We'd like to share a few of these stories with you.
In 1951, I was a lonely young mother living in Martinez, and I knew very few people, and my husband worked long hours. And I saw in the local paper that a group of Jewish women was having a tea in the next week or so, and anyone that was interested should come. So I didn't know any other Jewish people in this area, and I got a babysitter, and I went to the meeting, and then that evolved into longtime friendships, And the following meeting, we formed what we called the League of Jewish Women, and that was to try to start a Jewish community in central Contra Costa County, and I was named the historian. And we started having a few more meetings, and the men got involved because most of these people had children that they wanted to have a religious school for and to meet other children. So the men got involved, and then we became a congregation, and we realized that we needed a space of our own. So a committee was formed, and after a lot of fits and starts, this property was bought for $53,000. And 2 acres of it were sold off to pay the first rabbi, and the state of California bought it from us. The first rabbi only lasted a year, and the second rabbi only lasted 2 years, and neither one of them ever took another congregation. We were tough because we really didn't know what we wanted. We had everyone from Orthodox to atheists who only wanted their kids to meet other Jewish kids. So we had a rough start, but I can't believe how it's evolved. It's just amazing. I'm very proud of it. And working at the rummage sales to buy the pews was not a fun experience, but it was worthwhile. And Dave and I had various board positions. I was never on the temple board. I was on the now it's Women of Isaiah board, and it's just been a very big part of our lives, and feel that we really were instrumental in starting a community, and I'm really just amazed at what came out of all this. When Rabbi Waldenberg became the rabbi here, he started the Havurah movement, and we were put into groups, if we were interested, of people with like-minded goals. Ours was not to have children's activities, because by that time none of us had young children. So we still are in the same Havurah. About half of the people are still alive, and it's been a wonderful part of our lives. It's a wonderful idea for a community. It really breaking it up into small groups. And I forgot to tell you about the most traumatic temple experience I ever had. Dave used to come home very late from board meetings, and one night he came home, and he really upset me because he said he'd signed a note for $20,000 to start a fund to buy a building and a site. And of course, we didn't have any money, and in those days that was an awful lot of money. So that was scary to me. But he reassured me that there were 9 other people on the note, and that we would never have to pay it back, and we certainly didn't.
Well, one of the first things that really impacted me was that my sister and her family moved here from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania to Antioch. And in 1978, there was no Jewish identity out there as far as a temple or a congregation. And both she and her husband, Bernie, really wanted the children to continue on with a Jewish education. And so they decided to make a commitment and drive from Antioch into Lafayette 3 times a week. and it fell on my sister's shoulders mainly to make sure this happened, between Sunday school and Hebrew school with 2 children. And because of the distance between Lafayette and Antioch, she would just stay here. And at that time, there wasn't a lot going on in the temple, so she would take a book and she would sit outside the rabbi's office. And at that time, it was Shelley Waldenberg. And she was such a regular there that he said he was going to have a plaque made with her name. And they became very good friends. A number of years later, she developed a very difficult cancer. And because she was known to him and to the staff, they stayed very much in touch with her. And Shelley not only called her when he was at Temple, but when she was at UCSF, no matter where he was traveling in the country, New York, Florida, on vacation, he kept in touch with her very regularly. And for me, that meant a lot. For her, it meant the world. For the whole family. And I thought, if there's a group that can really do this, be there when you really hit a bump in the road, it's something I want the affiliation with. When I see this temple has grown to over 900 families, I see my grandchildren willingly come here. It means a lot to me. Very recently, this last month, we lost our son, very suddenly. And within a week of getting sick, he passed away. And I must tell you that both the rabbis were there all the time. Daily were in contact with us. And after he passed, they visited, they sat with us, they consoled us, they helped us. So for anybody to not think this is worthwhile doesn't get it. Agreed?
Agreed.
So Richard, what about you?
Well, my experience is quite different. I'm not Jewish, and I'm here because I'm married to Marcia. But I've been struck from the very beginning how welcoming the congregation is. What really blew me away was a couple of years ago during the High Holy Days when they called up all of the non-Jewish family members to be up at the Bema and were publicly acknowledged at Temple, which was really quite amazing. So I just find it a very nice place to be. I love the rabbis. They're all fantastic. So there's really, it's a wonderful place for someone coming in, even though you're not Jewish. So it's got a very nice family feel to it.
That you'd like.
Well, back when we were just joining the temple and still living in Oakland, my 5-year-old daughter, Deborah, wanted to go to Friday night services and see what this new place was like. And I had been a little bit hesitant. It was a very large synagogue. We were coming from a smaller one. And was feeling a bit awkward as we did indeed come. And just as we entered the sanctuary, we were immediately greeted by Terry Naylor Friedkin and her 5-year-old daughter, Jessie. And they just swooped us up, said, come sit with us. And it was such a warm, welcoming feeling. And it made us feel very well accepted and very much a part of things that evening. And as the years went by, her younger daughter and our younger daughter became very close friends. And her daughter just attended our wedding, so that they have continued their friendship, and it was just a very, very nice, welcoming feeling.
Right. Marty?
Hi. We joined Temple Isaiah in 1986, and it's been a great experience. We always wanted to support a temple, and we looked around. This was our community temple. We live in Moraga, so we joined Temple Isaiah. And I guess one thing that changed my feeling about Temple or increased my commitment is in 1996 my mother passed away, and I made a commitment to come to services every week for 11 months to honor her memory. And it was a great experience. Sometimes I would be by myself, sometimes with my family, and you just get to see the entire life cycle over a year. You get to see births and deaths and B'nai Mitzvah and everything else. And I was impressed by how well the rabbis did, and they seemed to make it feel new and fresh for every event. And that was great. And I liked it and met a lot of people, felt good at the Onik Shabbats. Sat by myself sometimes and was included with other people other times, depending on how I felt most of the time. And that was a springboard to becoming more active. And I became a board member. I served on the board for around 9-10 years. And have just enjoyed the experience thoroughly. So I think it's a good community. I think it offers a lot. And when I was on the board, I was impressed with how much input you could have if you become active. And I'd always heard my parents talk about if you're active and you contribute, then you're heard. And I think that's true at Temple Isaiah. So that was a good point and a good feeling for me.
Those of us who heard these stories firsthand have had the privilege of reflecting on what we learned. The stories were all about the benefits of dedication and commitment. The hallmark of any successful relationship is investment. We get out what we put in. And we are so truly grateful to the generations who established and built this community. In this day and age, we are all called upon to be members of multiple communities, our neighborhoods, each of our children's schools and sports teams, to name just a few. And each of these requires the contribution of significant time, energy, and resources. While we invest greatly in these, we realize our affiliations with each of them is fleeting, and we move on to other temporary communities. Here at Temple Isaiah, we have the opportunity for a forever community, one in which we raise our children, of course, but also one that is there for us as we meet all of life's joys and challenges. Our affiliation with this community must be intentional and guided by our values as a Jewish people. The founders and long-term members of Temple Isaiah built not only the physical structures brick by brick, but they also built a community, the one that we have been blessed to inherit. While we may not need to build any more structures, we bear the responsibility for continuing to strengthen our culture and build our community, the forever community which will sustain us all for years to come. You, the Temple Isaiah families, are the true foundation. Without you, the men, women, and children, it's just a group of buildings. We invite you to join us for the second phase of Kesher Isaiah, when, starting in February, we will be holding community conversations with all of you to answer the question, what will we build together?
Then we'll meet Savim. We stand here today, remember the dream. If you are a 10, then we'll meet Savim. We stand here today, remember the dream. If you are a 10, then we'll meet Savim. We stand here today, remember the dream. If you are a 10, then we'll meet Savim. We stand here today, Kadosh.